Welcome to List Lab. Today, we're counting down 10 possible Jack the Ripper suspects from history, more than a century after the infamous 1888 murders in London's Whitechapel. The killer's identity remains one of history's great mysteries. In this episode, we'll examine each suspect and why some believe they could have been the elusive Jack, as we count down from number 10 to number 1. Number 10. James Maybrick. James Maybrick was a Liverpool cotton merchant who became a controversial Ripper suspect due to evidence that surfaced long after his death. In 1992, a diary purportedly written in Maybrick's own hand was discovered, containing detailed descriptions of the 5 canonical murders, including some grim details believed to be known only to the police and the killer. The diary's author never names himself outright, but repeatedly refers to Sir Jim, a nickname Maybrick was known to use for himself. Not long after the diary emerged, a Victorian pocket watch came to light engraved with the words "I am Jack" and Maybrick's name, alongside the initials of the Ripper's victims. Both the diary and the watch remain hotly debated, with many experts suspecting them to be hoaxes, but their appearance has kept James Maybrick in the spotlight as a possible Jack the Ripper. Number 9. Walter Sickert. Walter Sickert was a British painter who emerged as a Ripper suspect many decades after the murders. In the early 2000s, crime novelist Patricia Cornwell famously accused Sickert, arguing that he had a morbid fascination with the case and a pathological hatred of women, possibly stemming from painful childhood surgeries that left him impotent. Cornwell even funded forensic tests on some of the Ripper letters, and one letter stamp yielded mitochondrial DNA that matched Sickert's maternal lineage, evidence she touted as a link to the crimes. However, critics point out this DNA type was common to many people and far from a unique identifier, and records suggest Sickert was in France during at least some of the Whitechapel murders. Most Ripper historians remain skeptical of Sickert's involvement, but the theory illustrates how the mystery's allure has entangled even famous figures long after 1888. Number 8. Jill the Ripper. A long-standing alternative theory posits that the killer may not have been Jack at all, but rather a woman, often dubbed Jill the Ripper. At the time, police only pursued male suspects, but one inspector noted that a witness claimed to see Mary Jane Kelly, the final victim, alive hours after her presumed time of death. This led to speculation that the murderer might have been a woman escaping the scene in Kelly's clothing. Proponents of the Jill theory suggest that a midwife or abortionist could fit the profile. Such a person would have had anatomical knowledge to perform the mutilations and could walk the streets at odd hours, even if blood-stained, without arousing suspicion. One frequently cited candidate is Mary Piercy, who in 1890 was convicted of murdering her lover's wife in London in a gruesome manner similar to the Ripper crimes. Mainstream experts argue there's little concrete evidence for a female killer, but the notion of Jill the Ripper endures a reminder that Victorian assumptions could have allowed a murderess to go unnoticed. Number 7. Prince Albert Victor. Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria, has long been the subject of sensational conspiracy theories tying him to the Ripper murders. Decades after the killings, some writers claimed the prince had contracted syphilis that drove him insane and turned him into a murderer, or that the murders were committed by royal agents as part of a cover-up. One, the famous Theatre Royal strafted a child with a woman in Whitechapel, and that Jack the Ripper was invented to eliminate any witnesses to the illicit affair, a plot popularized in the graphic novel and film From Hell. In reality, there is no hard evidence linking Prince Albert Victor to the crimes, and records show he was not even in London on the dates of several murders. Police of the era never seriously pursued the prince, and historians today consider these royal rumours implausible. Yet the idea of a killer prince remains one of the most intriguing, if fanciful, Ripper theories. Number 6. Thomas Cutbush. Thomas Cutbush was a disturbed young man whose violent antics led some in the 1890s to suspect him as Jack the Ripper. In 1894, The Sun newspaper ran an explosive series of articles accusing Cutbush of being the Ripper, even suggesting he'd contracted syphilis from a prostitute and developed murderous delusions as a result. The public furor was great enough that Scotland Yard's Assistant Chief Constable, Sir Melville Macnaghten, wrote a memo to debunk the story. In it, he named 3 other men more likely than Cutbush to have been the killer. Cutbush himself had been committed to an asylum after a spree of bizarre stabbings in which several young women were slashed in the backside on London streets. He was certifiably insane and capable of violence, but no evidence ever tied him conclusively to the Whitechapel murders. Nevertheless, the Cutbush scare influenced the investigation's course, indirectly prompting officials to clarify who they thought the real Ripper might be. Number 5. Francis Tumblety. Francis Tumblety was a flamboyant Irish-American doctor who became one of the few Ripper suspects actually arrested during the murder spree. Tumblety was known for his hatred of women and his bogus medical career. There were even rumours that he had tried to purchase wombs or other organs from a London medical museum, a ghastly detail given that the Ripper had removed organs from some victims. In November 1888, as the Ripper manhunt intensified, Tumblety was detained by police on unrelated charges of gross indecency. Crucially, he was free on bail on the night of the final murder, Mary Kelly's, and was rearrested shortly afterward on suspicion of involvement. Rather than face further inquiry, Tumblety fled England, jumping bail and escaping first to France and then back to the United States. A senior British investigator later confirmed that Tumblety was indeed considered a prime suspect at the time. While no trial ever took place to prove his guilt, the fact that he skipped town immediately after the killings has cast a long shadow of suspicion over this suspect. Number 4. Joseph Barnett. Joseph Barnett is the only prominent Ripper suspect who had a personal connection to one of the victims. He was the former fish porter who lived with Mary Jane Kelly, the last of the canonical 5 victims, and he knew her intimately. Barnett lost his job in mid-1888, and as money grew tight, Kelly returned to sex work, causing strain in their relationship. Some theorists suggest Barnett might have begun murdering prostitutes in Whitechapel out of a twisted attempt to frighten Kelly away from the streets, or out of resentment toward the sex trade that he blamed for their troubles. In this scenario, his rage built up until, tragically, he killed Kelly herself in a jealous fury when she refused to quit prostitution or reconcile with him. Notably, Kelly's murder in November 1888 was the final Ripper killing, which proponents of the theory argue makes sense if her death fulfilled Barnett's motive and gave him no reason to continue. There is no hard evidence against Barnett, but his close relationship with a victim and a conceivable motive have kept him on the list of suspects. Number 3. George Chapman. George Chapman, born Severin Kalowski, was a Polish barber who arrived in London in 1888 and later became a known serial killer in his own right. After the Whitechapel murders, Chapman gained notoriety for poisoning 3 of his common-law wives, crimes for which he was convicted and hanged in 1903. Ripper investigator Inspector Frederick Abberlin personally favoured Chapman as the killer, noting that he was violently abusive toward his partners and matched descriptions of a man seen with one of the victims shortly before her death. Intriguingly, Chapman's movements align with the Ripper timeline. He settled in Whitechapel just before the murders began, and he left the district around the time they stopped. On the other hand, skeptics point out that Chapman's known method of killing was poison, not the brutal mutilation seen in 1888, a drastic change in MO that many find unlikely for the same culprit. Despite these doubts, Chapman's presence in the right place at the right time, combined with his proven capacity for murder, make him a noteworthy suspect in the Ripper case. Number 2. Montague John Druitt. Montague Druitt was a well-educated barrister and schoolteacher who has figured prominently in Ripper law due to a striking coincidence of timing. In late November 1888, just weeks after the last canonical murder, Druitt was inexplicably dismissed from his teaching post. Then, in early December 1888, he was found dead in the River Thames, an apparent suicide that occurred not long after the murders ceased. This chain of events led some contemporaries to suspect that Druitt might have been Jack the Ripper and had taken his own life once his ghastly spree ended. In 1894, a top police official, Sir Melville Macnaghten, wrote a private memo naming Druitt as one of 3 prime suspects, and even noted that Druitt's own family had reportedly suspected him as the killer. However, no hard evidence ever emerged against Druitt. In fact, records suggest he may have been out of London on certain key dates, and an investigator at the time concluded that the case against Druitt hinged largely on the timing of his death rather than any direct link to the crimes. Montague Druitt remains a fascinating suspect because of the era's suspicions, but most experts view his Ripper candidacy as circumstantial. Number 1. Aaron Kosminski. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish-Jewish immigrant and Whitechapel resident, is considered by many Ripper historians to be the most plausible suspect. At the time of the murders, police officials strongly suspected a man fitting Kosminski's description. Years later, Assistant Commissioner Sir Robert Anderson recalled that the Ripper had been identified as a low-class Polish Jew who was subsequently confined to an asylum. Indeed, a marginal note by Chief Inspector Donald Swanson in Anderson's memoir revealed the suspect's name as Kosminski, and another senior officer, Macnaghten, also listed a Kosminski among his top 3 suspects in 1894. Aaron Kosminski was a hairdresser who suffered a mental breakdown. By 1891, he had been committed to Colney Hatch Asylum, which fits the police narrative that the murders stopped when the culprit was institutionalized. Much later, in 2014, investigators announced that DNA from a shawl supposedly found near a victim matched genetic markers from Kosminski's living relatives. However, experts have challenged this finding, noting that the shawl's provenance is dubious and the DNA evidence is far from ironclad. While definitive proof remains elusive, Aaron Kosminski aligns with several pieces of the puzzle, including contemporary witness accounts and police reports, making him a leading contender in the enduring mystery of Jack the Ripper. Which suspect did you find the most compelling? Let us know which theory intrigued you the most in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to ListLab for more insightful history countdowns.